Hey, everybody. Just want to let you know as we prepare for season 2 of When I Stop Fighting the podcast, which I am terribly excited about, we're going to play some of the highlights from season 1 and some of the most listened to and watched episodes of season 1 over the next couple of weeks. So April 16th is when season 2 begins, and we're going to wind up season 1 by showing you some of the best from season 1. So enjoy, and we'll talk soon. Welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast. My name is Daryl Dittmer. Today I'm joined by Sarah Sandidge, a life and recovery coach who helps overdrinkers find not only freedom from addiction, but also what's next in their beautiful lives. Sarah is also, near and dear to my heart, a sober human. Welcome, Sarah. So great to have you on.
Thanks. I'm really glad to be here. It's exciting to get to hang with you today.
Thank you. Yeah, very cool. We have met on, X, I guess, sort of, and just seeing each other's stuff, and I was drawn to a lot of the things that you impart, and it was a very cool thing. I know you do a newsletter too, right? Maybe tell us a little bit about that before we crank it up.
Yeah. So I just launched it about a week and a half ago. Something that had been on my mind for a while, and I finally got it going. But it's just called the Sober Daily, and it's basically just a resource newsletter. So I find as I'm reading other sober stories and sober books that people often say, they one of the biggest things that helped them was just digging into the sober world. Mm. And so I just wanted to offer something that was really easy, like a really easy touch point where people could dive into the sober world very easily. So every day I send it out Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. And every day is a new theme. So for example, anxiety was a big one. And then I just have resources like podcasts you can listen to, YouTube videos you can watch, posts you can read, books you can read, all of those sorts of things. So sort of whatever medium speaks to you, there's something there for that. So
I'm
excited about it. It's new, but I'm hoping it'll take off and be a great resource for people.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I'm actually, do I sign up on your website, or how do I do that?
Yeah. So there's actually just the soberdaily.com is its own link. There's a landing page there, and you can sign up for it right there. And then there's a list of archived newsletters there at the bottom. So just a really simple page, and that's it. Sign up and they start coming.
Very cool. No, that's great. I will sign up when we get done here, because I think
awesome.
That's
yeah. And you've already made it on the list, on the resource list. So
oh, cool.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, that's good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool. I've tried, just in various ways, because everybody's got a different journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
It's interesting as I traverse this journey of recovery and just freedom and all the wonderful things that come along with it, just trying to impart these things to other people, and there's just so much there, and there's so many ways to embark upon a sober life, and then as I know you are a huge proponent of, to make our lives what they're supposed to be, right?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think that's the key.
Yeah, definitely. It's not just about getting sober. It's about what you can do with your life once you do get sober. So
yeah. And then I've been working on that for a bit, and and have and have loved it, and it's not always fun. I mean, sometimes
it's not.
Sometimes life can be difficult, and I think that's an important thing to. I'm going to get to your story in a minute, but I think that's an important thing to impart to people is, look, life can be difficult, either sober or not sober. It's certainly going to be more difficult not sober,
right.
but the expectation, I'm a huge fan of expectations, and I want people to know that life is still going to happen.
Yeah.
Life is still going to be, potentially difficult and disappointing, but you can deal with it from a completely different perspective.
Yeah.
From as far as your mind and your heart and your soul and all of those things. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
very cool. Anyway, speaking of journey, I apologize for not, I don't want to be the one doing the talking here.
No, that's fine.
So if you could tell us about your journey and what brought you to where you are now, I think everybody'd love to hear that.
Yeah, and it's kind of a simple story. I grew up in a very religious household, and drinking was, you know, like you're going straight to hell if you have a drop of alcohol. Um, my mom grew up in an alcoholic household, and so she saw the effects of that firsthand. And she was the one that said, we're breaking this cycle, like going the complete opposite direction. And I grew up in a great household, loving, by the way. I just want to make sure that's clear. But that was the expectation, and that stuck with me. I'm like, yeah, we have it in our family. It could be a generational thing. Like, I'm just staying as far away from it as I possibly can. And I did until I was about 33 years old. um, I'd had maybe a couple of drinks, at an anniversary dinner or something like that up until that point. Um, but then life was hard, like you said. I had two littles at home, and my husband was traveling a lot for work. And life was just not like, I had such a great life, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Hmm.
Not at all. And so that expectation thing you were talking about, that was a huge factor in my story. My expectations were not happening. I just imagined this big, beautiful dream life. And from the outside looking in, like, yeah, I did have a big, beautiful dream life. But for me personally, that's not how it felt. And so, anyway, I sort of got introduced to alcohol randomly. And I was drinking on the weekends, and then the whole progressive thing happened where I just wanted to drink every single day. And I did for about 9 years. Um, and I kept trying to quit, and I knew I was drinking too much, and I was thinking about it constantly all the time. There'd be the wine bottle on the counter, and I think, when is it too soon to start drinking that? Um, and then we moved overseas for a couple of years, and the culture there was very alcohol heavy. Everybody drank at every event. I remember the first birthday party we got invited to, a kid's birthday party, was at like a club, like a country club type thing. And they were serving mimosas. And me and my husband were like, this is the best party ever. It was just 100% the culture there. Everybody drank. Even at our church Christmas party, the pastor was bringing out his, whiskey and like his best scotches. And at the time I was like, this is amazing, until I found myself, crawling home from friends' apartments late at night and sleeping in the bathroom, and, just doing all the really stupid stuff because I had just let it get out of hand. I'm sorry, this is taking too long. I didn't mean for
No,
this to
not at
take
all.
such a long
Not
time.
at all. Love it.
So we moved back from overseas, and that was probably the hardest year of my life. I had just tanked with drinking, and we didn't want to move back, and it was a whole thing. It was during the pandemic, so it was just a big messy move, and I just found myself completely, I guess it was my rock bottom. I was drinking a lot, but I was also just physically completely shot. My hormones were completely messed up. I couldn't function half the time, not because I was drunk, but because my brain was just fried.
Mm.
So I knew, I knew I had to quit. And again, I tried and tried and tried all the different ways. Although I didn't go to AA, and I still would say to this day that I feel like if I had taken that step, and said, yeah, AA is for me. It's not like for all the people sleeping under the bridge,
Mm.
like it could be for anyone, including someone with my story. Um, I think that I could have gotten sober much faster, but that's sort of a side note. Um, anyway, so my story ends with a miracle, and I had some friends praying for me, and I of course have been praying for myself, that the Lord would literally just take away the desire to drink, and that's exactly what happened. It was literally like overnight. Like I just lost the desire to drink, and it had been my 100% sole focus for 9 years. Um, and of course, I had to actually still quit. I had to stop putting the liquid in my mouth. But as soon as I did that, that was it. It was that was the end of it. So it's been 2.5 years, and of course, there's every once in a while, it's like, oh, why, like of course I can drink. You have that moment where you're like, I'm fine now, and then and then you think back, like, how many times did I say that, and then end up relapsing and right back in the same hole and even worse. So um the temptation is very, very small. I'll say that, because I know where it would lead back to. So
Very cool. No,
yeah.
and thank you for sharing your story. It's so important to hear different stories from different people, and I was probably more of a normal, hey, I started at around 13 and it progressed, and
Hmm.
then I have an abnormal story of being, getting sober at 19, which, be
Mm.
2 years before I was old enough to drink. So, and everybody's story is different. I think
Yeah.
it's very interesting that you were 33, really
Hmm.
when you kind of started on that journey, and
Yeah.
but I guess it just goes to show that everybody starts in a different spot. Everybody's, progression is a little bit different, and
Hmm.
and the stories are a little bit different.
Hmm.
I had a hard time relating, like you said, the people under the bridge, right? And
Hmm.
and
Right.
I used the 12 steps, but I was 19.
Mm.
I hadn't lost a home, I hadn't lost a house, I hadn't lost a wife, I didn't have anything,
Right. Right.
I didn't have two nickels to rub together, so there was not much to lose other than my mind and
Hmm.
my soul and my heart and all of those things that I think in the 12 steps, they call it a spiritual malady, which I would say
Hmm.
is, for me was very accurate, but also, I was emotionally, mentally, and spiritually bankrupt.
Hmm.
And that was sort of what drove me back. So what drives you now in terms of sobriety? I think I love that you're reaching out to help people, and congratulations on 2.5 years. I think that's
Thanks.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So what drives you now? What keeps you going? What keeps you on the path and continuing to grow your helping of others?
Hmm. Um, I mean, one big thing, like you said, is my mind. I'm a huge dreamer. I love to plot and plan and think. Like I like to just sit around and think. And that last year, before I did get sober, my brain was just gone. I
Mm,
I would sit and just stare at the TV and have no thoughts about what I was watching. There was no interaction in my brain. And I noticed that, like, I recognized, like, I don't have any thoughts. I haven't come up with a new idea in a long time. And I'm like an idea generator. Like every day I have some new big plot and plan, for something. And it was just gone. And so I hated that. Like I hated it so much because it's a huge part of who I am and my personality. um so that's one big thing that it always inspires me to like stay sober, because I don't ever want to lose my brain again.
mm.
And then of course I have kids, I have teenagers who are watching every single move I make, and they let me know, that they're that they're watching. If I say I'm going off coffee for a week and I slip up and get one, my daughter's like, "Mom, you said you were going off coffee." So I have two like really good little consciences sitting on my shoulders at all times. Um so that's huge to me, that makes me motivated. And then just as far as like helping people, I even before I got sober, I kept thinking like if I ever conquer this, I want to help other people because it's the darkest place I've ever been. I know there are other dark places, that people go. Like you said, everybody has their own personal story. Um, but it was such a dark hole, and I just kept thinking like I don't want anybody else to experience this, and if I can help just one person or two people get out of this hole, like then it'll be worth it. So um that's always in the back of my mind, even when I come up with other ideas that that have nothing to do with the sober world. I just think it was a gift that I was able to get sober, and I would love to help other people do the same thing. So
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I look at it exactly the same way, and I've done my best to try to help other people with whatever I can from a
yeah.
sobriety perspective. But you mentioned it being a gift, and
Mhm.
and I look at it exactly the same way. But that's difficult to do, when you're still in the throes of toward the end, or you're just
Mhm.
newly sober, and it's difficult, and
Mhm.
it's all those sorts of things. But how do you, if you could just maybe expand on that gift, as opposed to, a lot of people look at it like, oh, I got to get sober. I got to, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
there's a huge disparity there between
Mhm.
a gift and I hate to say curse, but kind of a
Mhm.
curse, right?
Yeah, well, and sometimes it does feel that way because I mean, I still have days, when my friends are drinking or my husband still drinks occasionally, and I think, gosh, why, like, you go back to that, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Why can't why can't I handle this? But nothing's wrong with you. We weren't meant to drink alcohol. Like it's a drug. Right? So
Yeah.
nobody says like what's wrong with you that you can't handle cocaine or heroin or, anything like that, but it's the same thing. It's a drug. So we're meant to be addicted to it. And yes, for whatever reason some people can handle it, but a lot of people can't. Like the majority of people can't. Um so anyway, that's not what you asked, but that
No,
that
that's good. You're
that
right.
helps me. Like it's not normal to be able to handle alcohol. That's what I'm trying to say. Um and so when I don't know, just again back to that dark hole, like once you get out of that and you realize as you start to heal, you start to go down that path and you get further and further along, and you're just able to see how much more you can do, how much more you can handle in life. Um, you get your creativity back. You're able to enjoy activities again because you don't have that constant voice in your head saying, "When am I going to get my next drink? How much did that guy drink? Are they noticing how much I'm drinking?" All those questions that just bombard you, like all of that goes away,
Mm.
and you just have all this space to be who you are. Like I think alcohol just completely uh, inhibits, I guess, maybe who you are as a person, the things you love to do, the things you love to think about, and just who you are. That's the best way to say it. So it's almost like you become alcohol instead of Sarah or Daryl.
Mm.
That becomes your identity. I don't want that to be my identity.
No,
And the
no.
further you get away from it, I think hopefully most people start to realize that. But you do, like you said, it takes time, and I think the more you've been drinking, the longer it can take, and that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I one of the things I talk about in a book that I have coming out in a couple of months is the further you go into the weeds, the longer it's going to take to get out of the weeds. I mean,
Mm,
that's just
yeah,
that's
that's a
just
great analogy.
kind of how it goes, and
Yeah.
that's okay. It's okay for wherever we're at and whenever we
Mhm.
decide to make those changes and do life differently and that sort of thing. But for me, it's important to understand, and the weeds aren't just about drinking or drugs or whatever. The weeds
Mhm.
I can be in the weeds in sobriety. I can be in the weeds
Mhm.
in recovery. And
Mhm.
how far do I want to go into the weeds, with whatever I'm doing? Because Because the cool thing about being sober is, you know, the little voice starts kicking in and like, nope, that's probably not a good idea, you know, and you kind of get those little messages
Yeah.
and now I can't, if I don't listen, I'll just beat my own butt, you know, like, all right, Daryl, you know, get it together.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of how it goes. But what came to mind for me when you were talking was that sobriety is such an opportunity, to change. And
Yeah.
I've thought about, you know, had I not gotten sober, I'm sure I'd be dead or I'd be in prison or wherever. You know, that would just be part of it. I wouldn't have lasted to the age I am now. I'm certain of that. But what if I was just a person who drank like a normal person and went about my life and went to my job and did my work and that sort of thing? I would never have been introduced to, maybe not, I can't say never, but I it's possible I would not have been introduced to something as meaningful and able to change me as, you know, for me, it was the 12 steps that got me started on the path. And I've, you know, the 12 steps have just been implemented in my life for a long time. But what a plan for living, and what an opportunity for living and for changing and for growing and for treating people right and for helping
Yes.
people,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so it's an
Yes.
opportunity at this point, as opposed
Yeah.
to, you know, anything else. It's an opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. And that, I think that's sort of what you were getting at with with it being a gift is, if you haven't gone through something big, then it's hard to have empathy for people. It's hard to it is hard to grow and to change and to realize, like, I can do hard things. Like, again, there's just so many things that come with it, like what you were saying. I Do you read the Daily Stoic? He has a newsletter. Have you heard?
I
I
I
don't know
do
if you've heard
not.
of him.
I do not.
Okay. I just started reading it, and it's really good. Um, but he had a post the other day about how, if we don't go through fire, you know, it's that age old analogy. Like, you have to walk through fire to become something, to like learn and grow and change, and just have that perspective of looking back. And I think the empathy thing is being able to help people and understand people. Um, that that's probably one of the biggest gifts that comes from sobriety, or walking through any kind of, you know, tragedy, trauma, anything like that. I remember you know, when we first started trying to have kids, I had a miscarriage. And when I first got pregnant, I was telling everybody and I was so excited. And I was just completely ignorant and oblivious to other people, to whoever I was telling. You know, I wasn't paying attention to their story.
Mm.
But as soon as I had that miscarriage, everything changed. Everything. My entire perspective on life changed. And suddenly I started paying attention to people more, you know, to where they were at in their journey. And of course, there was some bitterness that came in with that. When I would see pregnant women everywhere, I'd be like, oh, why them and not me? You know, that whole
Mhm.
thing. But that was like the first tragedy. I had a really good upbringing. Very blessed, lucky in that way, because I know that's not, like, there's so many stories that aren't like that. And so, you know, I think it was 25 maybe when that happened. And that was sort of like the first big tragedy in my life that really opened up my mind to just feeling for people, having empathy, and like understanding not everybody's coming from the same place. um the cashier today, she might be really grumpy, and there may be a really good reason for that, you know.
Yeah.
Just really simple things of like being able to see people. And then walking through being addicted to alcohol, and then breaking free from that. My goodness, talk about a like, just having so much love and empathy is the best word for people and for wherever they're at. in their life, in their stage, and not judging them because they can't figure it out, and all of that. It's just, that's a huge, huge gift in sobriety for sure.
It is. It is. And being able to, you mentioned empathy and seeing people,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the things that's so important to me now, because rather than getting, upset with the cashier, now I can smile at the cashier. Now
Yeah.
I can maybe do something that would change that person's day, instead
Mm-hmm.
of getting all wrapped up in myself, like,
Yes.
oh man, they're really bumming me out, or she did this wrong, or like all that
Mm-hmm.
sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to forget about myself. I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
think about myself all the time. I can think
Yes.
about,
Yeah.
right, what's right and what's good for other people, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is in itself an incredible freedom, that comes along with, following a lifestyle where we
Mm-hmm.
improve and where we get better.
Yeah. Yeah. The freedom. I love that word so much. Yeah.
I do too. That's one of my favorite words, and I have a
Mm-hmm.
few. I'm actually going to be writing a blog about my few, so I can't tell you what they are right now.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm super curious. You'll have to send it to me.
Yeah, I will. I will. And I will. I was just kidding, but so allowing is one of my
Mm,
favorite words, to
mhm,
allow life to happen, as opposed to getting my little fingers in it and trying to make it all different and control it and
mhm.
all that sort of thing. So just allowing, which I
Yeah,
think is huge.
yeah.
And another one that's huge for me is resonance,
Mm,
because I know what's right,
mm,
for me at pretty much any given time, and
mhm.
what hits me correctly, and where I'm led, and where my life is headed. I and I'm going to be quiet in a second here, but I
No,
just
I love this. I
I
wanna
think
hear this.
I think about this stuff, because I was talking to my wife the other day. My wife is very much, her name is Christina,
Mhm.
very uh academic, studious, spreadsheets, and I'm not like that.
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, well, whatever. What do I need a to-do list for? The only time I ever need a to-do list is when my brain overflows and I have to write some things down that I need to remember. But
Yeah.
so we were having that discussion the other day, and what came to mind for me was resonance. I did have a point, and although it didn't sound like it. Um, but resonance for me, there's I'm being led on what's next,
Mhm.
and I love that feeling, because that in itself is a freedom.
Yeah.
Um, to I won't mention number 3, but it sounds like reverence, which
Okay.
we can talk about some other time. But so the fight with alcohol, that you had, and that fight is mostly gone, right? Which is
Mhm.
cool. So
Yeah.
what else? What do you what do you fight with today? Are there any fights that sort of stick out, or
Oh,
what
man.
what do you?
Um, Definitely myself.
Mm,
Um, and I was thinking about this because I know fighting is, it's sort of a theme of yours, but the word wrestling came to mind.
mm,
A specific type of fighting. Wrestling is very intimate. It's up close and personal. If your opponent has you pinned to the ground, if you just stop and breathe for a second and think about your next move, you might be able to get out of it and
mm,
overcome them. And so it's just this very like intimate back and forth type of just visual image in my mind. And that I would say that is definitely has been a lifelong thing for me with myself because like I mentioned, I'm very creative and so I stop and start things constantly. I beat myself up, not a lot. I have a lot of more grace for myself than I used to these days, but just like why can't you figure this out? Like I sound a lot like you. Like I hate to do list. I always have thoughts, overflowing in my brain and fun things that I want to do. And then I can't figure them out. And so I have this idea in my head, back to expectations. I have this idea in my head of what things should look like. And so that has been a constant struggle, wrestling, refining, I will say, with myself over the years. And that affects everything else that I do. So how I parent, for example, when they were little, I had this expectation of like what that should look like, how they should behave, who they should be. And slowly over the years, like I really let that go and just said, you know what, they like, this is who they are. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what I put in front of them. Like I can put everything in front of them, but they're still going to choose their own choices because they're their own little individual people, So that just having kids and like raising them has been a huge refining process for me, that has helped me grow individually. And then, like I said, again, it just sort of affects every area of my life. So I kind of like who I am today and where I'm going. And it's like, it's really exciting to be like, oh, I'm, like I'm actually a cool person and what I'm doing is actually okay. And like the way that I'm living is the way it, as you said, it resonates with me, like, and accepting yourself for who you are. All those words you said. So just allowing myself to be who I am. And finding what resonates with me and then just being okay with that, like allowing that to be okay because that's the way I work. And that, if I'm making sense, I feel like I'm totally babbling right now.
No, you're dialed in. That's good. That's great. I love it. I think that there's the wrestling match. I had no idea when one of my great mentor of my life, his name was Bud, and he said to me, he said, which is why I titled my books that way. He said, Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh. So that meant like that much to me back then, maybe that much. And now, several years later, it's an interesting, I think about it all the time. Not just because the books are laying around, but that's like, I think about it all the time and the fights get more subtle and the fights, even, doing something like if I'm doing my breathing practice or I'm meditating and this little thing pops into my head, like, oh, you got this to do and you got that to do. And, so then the little wrestling match starts, and I'm like, no, we're not going there. And, so I continue doing my thing, but the fights get subtle and over time, I just didn't know when Bud told me that, a long time ago, that I was going to be carrying that with me for the rest of my life. But thank God I did. And thank God he told me that.
It's huge.
Because it's huge.
Yeah.
So we're getting toward the end here, but I love to ask, and because everybody has a little different perspective, and I think that's incredibly healthy. If someone were struggling, and I know you're working with people, that certainly could be struggling either with addiction or alcohol or even early in recovery or whatever it might be. What is your advice for people just getting on the path and just starting? What would you say are the most important, or were the most important things for you?
What do you mean specifically? Like to do? Or like if somebody wants to get sober, what should they do?
Or get sober, or, say they're sober and they're struggling and they don't want to go back, but they don't know how to go forward, like that sort of thing.
I would say the biggest thing is community. So, I've heard it so many times, people trying to do it on their own. They're ashamed. They don't want to tell anyone. They think they're the only ones struggling with this thing. And as soon as they reach out, as soon as they find their tribe, everything sort of clicks into place. And that doesn't necessarily mean like someone who's trying to get sober. That doesn't mean they're going to get sober right away. You know, it could still be years down the road, but now they have a support system in place. And whatever that looks like, you know, there's tons of different communities. That doesn't just mean AA. I think everybody has that notion in their head, like that's the only community out there, but it's not. And I have nothing against AA. I never went, so I can't, you know, speak intelligently about it. I know it works for a lot of people, and I know a lot of people it doesn't work for. But just trying things also, and not just throwing something out because you've heard one person's story about it. So like reaching out and finding a community, whether that's online, in person, you know, through books, like reading books. Maybe you love to read books and you can find a community through that. There's just so many different ways that you can do that. But having that support system, I mean, I had one person, a good friend of mine, and she had never struggled with alcohol, but she was so empathetic, and she wasn't judgmental, and she wasn't in my face. But every once in a while, she would just send me a text and say, "Hey, how's it going?" You know, like that's it. And she'd send like a little beer emoji, like this is specifically what I'm talking about, you know. And I could text back and say like, I'm really struggling right now or whatever. And she would respond and say like, praying for you, or like what I had said. You know, there wasn't any like advice giving, trying to help me figure it out. It was just like she was just there, and I knew she was there, and that was so big, like so big, just to have that one person there supporting me, knowing like she was in the background. So yeah, find community. I think that is the most important thing for before, during, and after.
100%. Couldn't agree more. Support is huge. I wouldn't have been able to do it without support and having people around me that, and you know, as I get older, my circle gets a lot smaller and has gotten a lot smaller, but I know that the people that are in my circle would take a bullet for me. They would fly to help me or you know, whenever they could, and you know, or whatever's going on with me, and you know, that those tight sort of relationships I think are absolutely crucial for our lives. So we
for
talked
our overall health. Yeah.
100%. I mean, you know, getting sober is one thing. Now we're doing that for our entire lives, you know, one day at a time, obviously, but you know, the rest of life is where the rubber hits the road, because I have to build a life to where alcohol, drugs, addiction, or addictions don't have me by the throat. And the way that they don't get a chance to have me by the throat is by me improving my life to such a point, and improving myself to such a point where I don't need it. It doesn't matter. You know, and that's, anyway, that's, you know, I could just,
we could go on and on,
babble on, but I won't. So how do we find you? I know you had mentioned your newsletter, but and I'll put, you know, whatever you say here in the show notes. How do we find you online or social media, or, you know, et cetera?
So my main website is just sarahsandidge.com, my name. My last name is a little tricky to spell, so don't stick an R in there, or, you know, leave out a D. But it's just my name. So sarahsandidge.com, and all of my coaching information is on there. And I have a blog on there where I write. And then the soberdaily.com is the new newsletter. I also have another newsletter that you can sign up for on my main website. That's just, I send out a newsletter 3 times a week, and it's just sort of like, it's for before, during, and after sober. So I write sort of whatever hits me that day that I feel like I need to write about. So I send that out as well. And then I'm on Twitter. I sort of took a break this summer because I wanted to hang out with my kids, which was so lovely. But I'll be digging back into that this fall. So my Twitter handle is at Jesus is my habit, which is what I was planning to like call my whole thing, you know, and then I shifted from that, which is no big deal, but that's why it's called that. So
Cool.
You can
No,
find me
thank
there
you.
too.
I love as soon as you said it earlier in the show, the sober daily. I think that's just really cool. That's just a cool name. So I'm going to go
Thanks.
do that. I'm going to go sign up for that as soon as
Okay.
we get done here, and you should see me pop up here at some point soon. And thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate you sharing
Yeah.
your story and your wisdom and your experiences and your hope and just the wonderful story that you have and the message that you have is going to be helpful for a lot of people. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
We'll do it again.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Talk to you soon.